Hi, it's Thomas with Classic Electric here in Sherwood, Oregon. I have a really unique opportunity today. I just finished up doing a hot tub this afternoon. It's now later in the evening. I've had dinner, and now we're going to shoot this video to talk to you guys about hot tubs. This customer has a really unique set of circumstances that would lend well to teaching all the different things that you could encounter in a hot tub. And she said, shoot your video, it'll be great. So let's start talking about it. There is an electrical panel right here. This is the garage. And the panel is right here. And this is coming out of the bottom of the electrical panel. This is my power coming out to go to my hot tub that I'm going to show you. And this is how I did it. I came down and we went this way. So as you can see, the conduit comes down and then turns and comes to here, and then comes up and comes into this disconnect box, which is what operates for the hot tub. Now, why we happen to be here, let's just talk about another disconnect box. This is your air conditioner, which is currently running, and this is its disconnect box. The whole point of having disconnect boxes is so that if somebody needs to service your equipment, they can turn it off from here, and it's within visible sight of the piece of equipment they're working on, so that they can't be harmed. That's why they want it within within visible sight, which the definition for code is within 50 feet. So that's what these are if you ever see them. So like we were saying, this is your disconnect box so that you can service this thing. There are breakers inside of it in this particular application. There's not in the air conditioner over here. It's just a pull out or fuses. But in the case of a hot tub, there's typically a GFCI breaker in here. So if anything goes wrong, it'll shut off so you don't get possibly harmed while being in the water in the tub. In this application, we've come from here, underground, and around over to the tub to feed it. But some of the things that I want to talk about in this application is you have to have this, but it has to be at least 5 feet from the edge of the tub. You can't be in the water and touch it. But it also needs to be not greater than 50 feet away, and it needs to be within visible line sight of the tub, which in this particular application, it meets all that criteria. But let's talk about some other things that are also pertinent to this as well. This is your typical backyard on most homes, which makes it great for this video. Anytime you come outside of your house, there has to be a light. So for those of you who add sliders later, I can tell that you've added it and that it was added later because there's somebody a lot of times doesn't put a light fixture here because, again, every time you go outside, front door, out the side of the garage or here, you got to have a light fixture. You can't step out in the darkness. So this is done correctly. Here's the light. But from the edge of the tub, from the water inside, not here, the water inside of the tub, you have to be at least 5 feet away. Your outlet, if you got a newer home, you're going to have one in the front and one in the rear. On the newer homes, the older homes, that wasn't code, but on the newer homes, it is. So this is correct. There is one back here. There must be an outlet out here somewhere. It must be at least 6 feet from the water's edge, but not greater than 20 feet. I assume the reason they do that is for servicing. I'm not sure what, because usually there's a drain in there and it allows the water out, but it is code, got to be within 6 and 20. And obviously GFCI protected, because that would have been that way, you know, when the house was built. But the reason the 6 foot rule is because any of the appliances that you have, let's say a radio, I know you're going to laugh and most of us use our phone and, you know, I got all that. But for those of us who plug in, the whole point is they don't want to set it up here and then it falls in the water, and they know it has a 6 foot cord. So that's where the 6 foot rule comes in, is in that way there's no way it's going to fall into the tub. It used to be 5 foot for quite a long time, just like the light. Then they realized, hey, these have 6 foot cords, and they changed it so it's 6 feet. The other thing that's interesting in this one is the fact that there's a water bib here. Now that's interesting. Same thing. You got to be 5 foot from there to the water's edge. If you have an older home and you have metallic plumbing, you're within this 5 foot. If in this case it's over 5 feet, but if it were closer, you'd have to run a bond wire over to here and put a clamp on this thing in the accidental somehow that this thing were to become energized. If you have a newer home and your house is all plastic, and then you might ask yourself, well, how do I know which one I've got? Well, if you've got an older home and you just had it all completely repiped, you know. But if you just bought the house, you're unsure, you can go to your electrical panel in the garage, and usually they're going to write on the panel cover, this home has non-metallic water pipe. Now, why are they doing that? Because they're telling me, the electrician, hey, I don't have to run a bond wire to the plumbing pipe because it's all plastic. After it's all drywall and it's all done, you might not know. So that's why usually they'll write that down in the panel. Not always, but usually. So if I knew for sure it was plastic and I was closer than 5 feet, I wouldn't have to worry about it. Most jurisdictions are not going to worry about this little piece of metal here because it's attached to plastic. If it is attached to the water and I'm closer, then I'm going to run a bond wire over. And I'm going to show you in a moment what I had to do to this gutter, and I'll show you a bond wire. Same thing with the windows. If you've got aluminum windows, metallic windows, they're going to want this to have a bond wire to it. You may think to yourself, goodness gracious, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, basic. And of course, you're probably thinking, how in the world am I going to energize my window? I've seen stranger things happen. So bottom line, you'd end up having to run a safety wire up here, and there'd be a little bit of a lug on here and anything. And again, this is all if you're within 5 feet. As long as you're outside of 5 feet, it's all good. Don't worry about it. The gutter was added after, because they did a bit of a change on this particular tub. Originally, the tub was going to sit further out here. Then it got pulled to in here. So when I first did my estimate, this wasn't part of it, but they brought it into here, and so we made some changes. This is a metal pipe, or a metal gutter like almost everybody has. Now, in this particular application, I do have a safety strap and wire coming. I'll explain this in a minute. I didn't come from the tub. I could have came from the tub. I actually came from the disconnect. We'll talk about that in a moment. But here is the lug and the wire that goes in the trench and goes all the way back here. You can do it here or you can do it there. I chose to do it on the disconnect on the wall over there because I didn't want to see it. And I'll explain that in a moment. So what you end up having to do is put a lug on here. You need to scrape the paint where the lug's going to be. I did a really nice job here. I didn't grind off half the, the gutter and all the paint and everything associated with it. I traced it out with a pencil and did a really nice job so that it, because we don't want it to rust, obviously. I think this is probably a non-rusting type of deal, but just in case. I put a bolt through it because this is so paper thin, I can't really attach to it. There's actually a bolt that goes all the way through and 2 nuts on the other side. I took it apart, pulled it apart, able to get my hand in there and locked it down nice and tight. The whole idea is if somebody were in there and somehow from there to there, because this is well within 5 feet, and they touched it and they got energized, you're going to have a real problem because you're not going to be able to get out of the tub if you're being shocked. You're just going to be sitting in there and you're going to be stuck. That's a real problem. That's why you really want to do these things well, because there's really not a lot of second chances if something goes wrong. That's why you will have an electrical permit in Oregon, and you will have a mandatory electrical inspection in Oregon for anything having anything to do with water, hot tubs and swimming pools, because there is no second chances. If you get shocked, you're just frozen and you're stuck. So we don't want to have that happen. So the reason that I brought a separate wire all the way from the disconnect box is because I didn't want to have a bare wire running across the concrete and into the tub. So I chose to run it in the trench, bring it around to where when this gets covered, the only thing you're going to see is this little guy right here. If your plumbing was too close, you'd have one of these. If you had metallic windows and you were too close, you'd have one of these. So in an ideal world, it's nice not to have anything anywhere near around this area, so you don't have to go to all the extra steps of doing this. But if you only got a really small backyard and it's the only place you can do it, this is plan B. It's all good. We don't concern ourselves with a lot of this little metal here. They're not too concerned about that because it's all wood all around it. That's not likely to become energized. Now, you're probably asking yourself a question. How is this stuff going to get energized? I actually asked the electrical inspector on this particular project because, as you can see, it is basically a detached wood structure. So I'm like, what in the world is going to energize this? So I was basically asking him, do I really need to do this? Because I just don't see how it's going to get energized. The answer was Christmas lights. I was like, okay, that made sense to me. But the more I thought about it, I was like, Christmas lights? They're not probably going to put Christmas lights out back. But over here on this table is all these really cute little lights that everybody hangs, out on your balcony for more general lighting, out here. Now that is something that most of us all have these days, and that's legit. So you could say, well, isn't the GFI over on the wall going to save me? I mean, that's what it's there for. If anything goes wrong, GFI is going to trip. Absolutely right, 100%. But how many times have you had a GFI fail in your home? I get calls all the time. Hey, my GFI quit. It's not resetting. You know, some other outlets in the kitchen aren't working or in the garage or what have you. So it definitely happens. So if you had those lights plugged in, your GFI failed, it happens. It gets up and in here, it gets up and in here. Are you going to hang any of this? It just, you know, the electricity works its way down. And if you were just hanging and stretching, and I mean, there's lots of things that could have happened in a worst case scenario. Now all of a sudden you've got a serious problem. So we're not going to have a serious problem because we have this extra strap here. So in an ideal world, keep the tub back a little bit. But if you do need it closer for lots of different reasons, there's ways around it, but you just need to be aware it's just more effort and more little safety wires and what have you. But as you can well see, after the trench is filled in, you're never going to see this thing here. It looks really nice, so it's really not the end of the world. Now let's talk about how we brought the wiring into the tub. Okay, so back to the power coming into the tub. So we've elected to keep this guy over here so that it is greater than 5 feet from the tub, like everything else, except for the outlet, which is 6. The reason is the power in this particular home is coming in from this corner over here, so I didn't really see the point in bringing it any closer. And it was nice and easy just to come around the corner up to there and then right back in a nice square pattern to come right on around to get to here. Once I got to here, I transitioned up and came in. Now, what we're about to talk about is why the reason this video got made in the first place, because a homeowner has said something to me that I thought was really quite telling. I thought it was great what she said. We were having this discussion and she said, well, how would I know? And I thought that was brilliant. And I thought, well, I guess I better put a video together so more of us can understand more about the tubs. So let's get into the specifics of this one, what started the video in the first place. Normally, I would want this tub over here. I would want this thing to come over another 18 inches further so that it's basically right at the back of the concrete. Now, the idea is so that then when I come out of the trench, I just come straight up and then straight into the tub. So I don't have all of this conduit that you're seeing here coming in to get to the electrical box. The electrical box is somewhere in this corner on every tub. You know, it's this corner, that corner. I always want to know where is it. So usually I'm writing my notes down when I'm doing an estimate. And I just take a piece of paper and I go, it's going to be like this, or it's going to be like this, or it's going to be like this. We need to figure out where the electrical is going to be. Don't have them just drop it on the ground and leave. And all of a sudden I'm bringing wiring all the way in around the tub. You know, we're spending more money for wiring. All of a sudden you're seeing the ugly conduit going all the way around, even though I'm trying to do a really nice job. Let's try to do this right and get it turned. Well, this tub was really unique in that because the way everything's built, if the tub was to the back, which would be, here's my wiring, and it would be turned and it would be up here. The problem is because of this angle of the slope down for the rain and everything, the way this is built down, if this top was turned, and then you tried to open it, all of a sudden you're right up into the roof. So that was problem number 1. Problem number 2, which I didn't realize, it's never come up before. In this case, again, if it's turned, all of a sudden the controls on this particular tub, which are here, will all of a sudden be out in the dirt. And you'd have to come out the house and come all the way around just to use the controls. Well, that's kind of weird, and that's when the customer made the comment, well, how would I know? Because I gave them a lot of notes and detail, and they did a great job, except none of us really knew this little bit of detail. The other detail that was interesting is there's a waterfall here in this particular corner, and in some tubs there's some unique features. A lot of them, all 4 corners are exactly the same. It's irrelevant. In this particular case, there's a waterfall, so it's like I got a waterfall, I got controls. So all of a sudden, kind of getting into the tub kind of dictates we ought to go, you know, in a particular direction. So in this case, the most logical thing to do was to put it this way so that you could open the cover and get to the controls and get in this way. It's like, okay, well, what does that do to the electrical? Well, in this particular case, I came out of the trench, and instead of coming straight up and then straight in, I needed to come across the concrete. Now, is that the end of the world? Not generally. But I do get some people that go, I don't want to see that. And I get other people that go, it's fine. I'm going to set a plant there. Don't worry about it. Piece of cake. So I get all different types of customers. That's why Before you buy the tub, give me a call. We'll come out, we'll go over all the angles and, what's acceptable to you. Some people are okay with it, some aren't. This customer's like, looks great. I'll set a planter right here. It'll be a wonderful thing. Don't worry about it. Okay, great, no problem. So in addition to doing the gutter that was not originally there, because I was talking to the customer about, we could have put the gutter on this other end, other than it was easier to tie into his, underground piping and whatnot for the water to just off of that corner. Secondly, by putting the conduit right here, I needed to switch gears and put a PVC Schedule 80 heavy wall, so if anybody were to step on it, it wouldn't just break. One of the things I did here when I made this connection is I actually have the writing turned outward, which normally I would not do. But the reason I did it in this particular case is I wanted the electrical inspector to know that I'd followed the rules and that I used heavy wall, so it says PVC Schedule 80. Normally I would turn that so you wouldn't see it. Or I'd just come into the back so you wouldn't have this conduit at all. So in this case, I turned it out. I'm sure he would have taken my word for it if I'd told him that, I did it right, but it's kind of nice that he doesn't really have to take my word for it. He can see it. And it's all strapped in here, so it's not going to move anywhere. Secondly, another thing that's interesting is some jurisdictions, depending on where you're at, might say, well, that could be a trip hazard. I mean, maybe. I mean, it's kind of back here, but I've seen, we've all seen stranger things happen. You got young kids or older people, or, I mean, you name the scenario. So they might suggest, hey, why don't you give us some pavers to protect this, even though it's heavy wall. Again, that's going to change a little bit depending on your jurisdiction. I'll just ask my inspector if I have a question like I did, hey, do I really need to, bond that gutter over there? And they said, yeah, we'd like to do that because, and because of the lights that people had later. I'm like, I hadn't thought of it, but I'm like, okay, that's a great point. Well, same thing here. This particular jurisdiction, I do a fair amount of work in, but I don't know everybody by name. And so I just took the extra effort to go on ahead and get these small little blocks that protect it. I got them at the big box store. They're $2.50. Again, in an ideal world, I would have come up and right into the tub. You never would have seen any of it. But every tub's different. Everybody's backyard's different. Everybody's house is different. So this is why I put the video together, because this one's really unique. So I thought, let's take the opportunity so you guys can learn a bunch of different variances so you can go to your backyard and decide what you've got. And then if you get far enough down the road, give me a call and we can see what's specific for your needs. So lastly, let's talk about the getting the wire from point A to point B. Now, in this case, the panel was on the outside wall, so it made perfect sense to just go right outside the outside wall, come right on down to the tub. Now, if you have a panel that's on an inside wall in the garage, I either got to get a conduit or something and get out to the outside wall to do this sort of a scenario, or if that's not, that isn't going to look well, another choice is to go up. Now that assumes like this house where it's a single story house. If you have a panel on the inside, I can go up, get into the attic, and then I could come down over here right out of this bird block here, and I could just come right straight down, and that would be another way of getting power into a disconnect box. But somehow, some way, we've got to get from the electrical panel out here. Now, if you have a two-story house, we're obviously not going up. We might go down and underneath. But if you got a basement underneath the house, and that opens another conversation. I can't go up, I can't go down, or maybe I can go left, right to get out. That's why you need to give me a call. We'll take a look at everybody's individual and figure out the best plan. I'll map it out for you. Now that we actually have it out here, now you got to do one of two things. One, you can do a trench, and we'll go over the depths. The trench, if you're going to put in what we call direct bury wire, so I don't have to put it in a conduit. I can protect it just a few feet that I need to get it down into the trench, and then I can just run bare wire all the way to there. Approved underground rated wires. They make them. There's a couple of different types, 2 or 3 different choices I could choose from. That's one option. The other option is I can go with a flexible conduit that's rated to be direct in buried for dirt, which this one is that I used. That's another option. And then another option is what we did to get here, which is solid rigid pipe all the way around. You're going to have different depths for every one of these. If you're going to run individual conductors all the way over there and just protect it where it goes down and protect it where it comes up, you're going to be 24 inches deep. If you're going to put it in a conduit, you're going to be 18 inches deep. Now again, here's your conduit. That's 18 inches to the top of the conduit, not 18 inches deep to here, and then you put a conduit in that's an inch high, and now it's 17 inches. Another thing to consider, if you dig it exactly 18 inches and a little bit of this dirt falls in the hole, which it always does, now all of a sudden it's 17 inches or 16 inches. So something to consider, it's not a bad idea to go just a little bit deeper, especially if you're renting a machine and you're going to, run it with a machine. Just nose it over and go as deep as you can generally, because then the inspector just looks and goes, oh yeah, it's a mile deep, and they don't even think twice about it. If you go out there and kind of scratch it in at 12 or 14 inches, he's probably going to go, not deep enough. If you make it plenty deep enough, they're like, looks wonderful, and they don't even think another thing of it. Something to consider. You can wire a hot tub 120 volts. Might as well talk about that for a moment. Some people say, well, I got an outlet right there. This thing comes on the cord. Can I plug it into that? Yes and no. The answer in this case would be no, because I know the approximate age of when this house was built. And I know that that outlet is probably tied on with the living room and the family room and what have you, because that's how everybody did it at the, at the general time this house was built. You want a dedicated circuit, because basically a hot water or a hot tub is basically like a hot water heater, is what I was getting ready to say, that it is a heater. I mean, hot water heater, hot tub, you're heating water. Well, you need a dedicated circuit for that. So if you put it on this outlet right here and you're using stuff in the living room and the family room, breaker's going to trip, because it's going to take an entire 20 amp circuit to run this if it was 120 volt. Another thing to consider, if it was 120 volts with a cord, the way it works with 120 volts is you can have the bubbles on or you can have the heat on, but not both. So in other words, the way you would do it, and again, this is usually for people, it's a one-person tub or it's a two-person tub, little guy. And the way it works is normally you would heat it up, then you would hop in, and then depending on how long you're in there, I mean, if you're only in there 10 or 15 minutes, it might be perfectly fine. If you're in there 30 minutes, it's probably going to get a bit cold. So you're running the jets, and all of a sudden it gets cold, and now all of a sudden you got to turn the jets off and then turn the heat on, because it's one or the other, not both. That's the only downside to 120 volt. And I'm still having to run a dedicated circuit from the electrical panel all the way over here anyway to a dedicated outlet. It's like, if we're going to do all that, you're a long ways down the road to just doing exactly what we've done here. And you can have 240 volts and have everything, have the heat, the bubbles, just like all the rest of us do. But it is an option. Yes, you can do a 120, but that's the downside to a 120. Now, when you're running conduit, they're going to tell you that you can't have more than 360 degrees of turn. And the reason for that is you can't pull wire through more than 4 90-degree turns. So what do you do if you have more than 4 90s? Now, in this particular application, to give you an idea, this goes down into the ground and turns. That's 1 90-degree turn. Then I come to here, I turn again. That's another 90-degree turn. Then when I come up, I've got another 90-degree turn. And then I've got to come to here and I've got to go in the tub. So what do you do if you have a scenario where, there's a lot of obstructions and we've got to go a lot of different things? Normally I just put direct wire in, so I don't have to worry about it, because I can just drop the wire in and turn as much as I want to. This is only if you're going to put wire in conduit. If you have more than 360 degrees of turns, you got a couple of choices. This is one of them. It's a C-conduit is what this is. So what it is it has an access door. You take the 2 screws off, the access door comes off. I can pull wire in, do a loop, and then keep going. That will allow me to be able to pull 360 degrees and then continue. Otherwise, I'd never get it through the next 90 after 360 degrees. So this is one way of doing it. You can put in a junction box, but the problem with the junction box is it's pretty good sized. I can cheat. My conduit is this size coming in, it's that size coming out, it's relatively small. So it's kind of a really neat way to go about getting past the whole 360 degrees. Because as you can well tell here, there's a lot of turns to get here. This one I've used here, when I come up, I have a variant. I use what's referred to as an LB conduit. In this style, it comes up and it goes like this, and it has an access on that side. So I could pull the wire up and then really nice and easily pull it into here. There would have been no way for me to pull all the way from that corner all the way around and up into this thing. And they don't let us do the homeowner thing. You pull the wire and you stick a piece on, you pull some more wire and you stick a piece on. You got 9,000 pieces of wire on there. It's all glued together and you could never get a wire out if you ever, yeah, I can't do that. This is the right way to do it. This is one of a couple of ways of doing it. There's another one that you guys may not even know exists, and I thought it'd be kind of fun since we're going to take some time today and go over some of this. It's a little bit advanced, but I thought you would enjoy this. Basically, it's a flower pot, except for it's not exactly a flower pot, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, about what it looks like. So, for example, let's say we're 10 years down the road. The homeowner's going to move. They want to take the tub with them. I know that sounds odd, but I actually get a lot of people, and maybe they have a really fancy tub and they want to take it with them. Maybe it failed and they don't want one at all, and and just get it out of here. What do you do with the wiring? One way of getting rid of the wiring, in theory, is right where that comes up out of the dirt, I can set one of these in. So essentially what happens is going to look like this. The conduit would come up and it would come into the bottom of the box. Now granted, it's going to sit right down here flush and level. They come in black lids for dirt. They come in green if you're in your grass. I mean, they come with different colors of lids. So the idea is right there, I would just cut that off and I could just put it in here and the wires would come out and I would put wire nuts on them that are rated for underground use. And I would put the lid on right here. This also works if you have a problem with 360 degrees. If I didn't go with this style, I could have put this in, brought my underground conduit up and into here, and then gone back out of it again and into the tub. You can use this for various different things. And again, it's really nifty because especially if you set it here, it looks a little funny if you just set it out in the yard. I mean, you can do that, but if you tuck it up right here, for the most part, nothing's ever going to happen to it. Put the lid on, life's great. So basically, inside of this box, if you can imagine, as a visual aid, you're going to have these two guys here just a little bit below the surface here. There's going to be wiring coming out of here that's going to come up and it's going to go into here. Or you can come up and then run another set of wiring in there and then use wire nuts between here and here. You'd have to get the approved wire nuts that are rated to be outdoor and in a box. But that's all you'd have to do, because just like in your house, it's essentially in the box with a lid on it. Same as you would have a junction box in the house. You can totally do that outside. This is another way to get around the 360 degrees, because if you get 360 into here, or 270, whatever the case may be, when you go out again, you start at 0. 90, 180, 270, and you can just keep doing this over and over for as far as you need to go. But there's various ways to get there. So hopefully you've learned something from this. I learned a little something because I wasn't thinking about the lid at the moment. And this particular tub is very unique because the electrical controls happen to be right there, which didn't make a lot of sense. So I wanted to put this video together. I'm happy the homeowner said something that jogged my memory that, hey, I ought to do one of these so I could show you guys a little bit of what goes into this. So thanks again. I'm Thomas with Classic Electric, and this is a wrap.